but I had incredible mentors who directed me to books and movies and music when I was in prison. And so instead of me like just listening to hardcore rap music, when I went to prison, when I was convicted, and then I was sent to the the men's prison at the age of 17, these guys had been incarcerated since the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so they didn't listen to rap music. They listened to rhythm and blues and soul and jazz, and being around these men who, for whatever reason, my energy, my perspective, my attitude guided them to me. We just aligned that way, and they saw something in me that was salvageable.
Welcome to Season 16 of Purposeful Empathy, a show that is dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who understand that the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. Thanks so much for watching or listening. Enjoy the show. Welcome to a new episode of Purposeful Empathy. Today I am joined by multidisciplinary artist Halim Flowers. In 1997, at the age of 16, he was arrested and given 2 life sentences. His experiences were filmed in the Emmy award-winning documentary Thug Life in DC. In 2005, he started his own publishing company, through which he published 11 books. In 2019, Halim was released from prison after serving 22 years. Upon his release, he was awarded the Halcyon Arts Lab and Echoing Green Fellowship Awards, and in 2020, he signed to be represented by DTR Modern Galleries as a visual artist. His visual art has been commissioned for the Queen of England Platinum Jubilee and Warner Brothers Centennial Celebration. Today, in addition to being a multidisciplinary artist, prolific author, Halim is an entrepreneur, public speaker, and activist. Welcome to the show, Halim.
Thank you for having me.
I came to know about your work through a mutual friend, Elif, in DC, who does a lot of work around empathy in museums. So I'm sure based on the world that you're in terms of art, that's how you came to know each other. And I have wanted to meet you for more than 2 years based on my coming to know about you through her work. And I just, in preparation for today's talk, rewatched your TED Talk. And I'm going to include the TEDx link in the show notes below, because I think everybody should watch it. It's just such a powerful, powerful TEDx. And I wonder if I could, as a starting point, invite you to share a little bit about something that you said in your TED Talk that really is very, very compelling. I weep for the boy that, right? And you kept using that sentence over and over and over again. And you talked about a community that failed you. I just wonder if you could speak to, because this is a podcast about empathy. And I think that we have to enlarge the circles of empathy that we have for quote unquote others. And you were othered by a system. And I wonder if you could, from a place of start, talk a little bit about that boy.
Yeah, that inspiration for that poem, I Will Cry for the Little Boy, it came from the story of Antwone Fishers, a movie that I saw that Denzel Washington, he directed and acted in. It's about the real life story of a guy named Antwone Fisher who was othered in the foster kid system, othered in the Navy when he joined the military service. And just through his experiences of being displaced, as a child and trying to find his way as an adult and moving through the world with that trauma, he wrote a poetry book called Who Will Cry for the Little Boy. And so for me, being displaced as a child, growing up in Washington, D.C., doing the crack era, mass incarceration, war on drugs, entering the school to prison pipeline at the age of 16, staying there until I was 38 for something that I didn't do. I felt, that I could reply to that question, who would cry for the little boy? And so I will cry for the little boy, because for me, that little boy now being in, as you mentioned, in the fine art space and having the opportunity to meet children who grow up in Palm Beach, in Nantucket, in Martha's Vineyard, and these very homogenous, as you see, I have a Yellowstone Club hat on, right? These very homogenous, ultra high net worth communities and homes who take me into their spaces because of my creativity, but their children experience trauma too. And so wealth and race and status and class is not, um, it doesn't grant immunity to the human condition of suffering. And so for me now, 3 years later, after the TED Talk, no, the TED Talk was in 2020. So 4 years later, my experiences of the little boy is far more comprehensive and collectively inspired than just the little boy that I was crying for when I wrote that piece as a little boy, you know, who socially constructed as Black, poor, criminal, super predator, menace to society, and just cast away to die in prison, you know, to rot away for prison for the remainder of my life. And so seeing that boy, in spite of being, in spite of the language attached to that child, to be othered, still I can cry for him and for the one who may find themselves in a zip code where people may not be Black or poor, right? It may not have those challenges, but we all have the condition of suffering. And I could cry for that boy too, and not look at that boy as like, what are you crying about? You're rich, you're white, you're privileged. And so for me, it's just like seeing now at this stage of my life, it's about understanding this gift of words and creative expression that I've been blessed with, and understanding now that I stand in a very unique position of someone who has seen the extremes of poverty and wealth. And I'm accepted into both openly, with credibility, and using my gift to bring empathy, right? Aligning my purpose with my gifts to extend empathy to both people on both sides of the tale of two cities.
Now, when I hear you talk, what comes up for me is wisdom and a lot of generosity, actually, because I think you could have been really angry, and I imagine you were angry. I just wonder what was the bridge? Was it the art? Was it the expression? Like, how is it that you didn't grow bitter and resentful and angry as your way of being in the world? Because that, you don't strike me as that. I mean, maybe you have moments of being angry and resentful. I don't want to assume anything.
Every day when I drive, every day when I drive, that's driving in America. and just coming back from Tuscany, and like this guy literally tried to run me off the road. I'm like, I'm doing 150 kilometers. Like, why are you trying to, like, I'm not going slow. But driving is definitely a dichotomous experience for me on the spectrum of the generosity that you speak about, which I'm normally just even keel. Some people say stoic. But for me, it's like, I like to simplify things. So what you put in is what you put out. And so a person could be very athletically conditioned, but if they don't eat proper nutrients and foods, their body will give off a lot of fat. And so for me, I have always been blessed to have mentors who saw something in me. People always say they see it in my eyes. And that's a gift that's so unique because I'm the only one that can't see my eyes, right? And so, but I had incredible mentors who directed me to books and movies and music when I was in prison. And so instead of me like just listening to hardcore rap music, when I went to prison, when I was convicted, and then I was sent to the men's prison at the age of 17, these guys had been incarcerated since the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so they didn't listen to rap music. They listened to rhythm and blues and soul and jazz, and even guys who had, they had been to the federal system, so they listened to rock and Johnny Cash and Beethoven and Mozart. And so just being around these men who, for whatever reason, my energy, my perspective, my attitude guided them to me. We just aligned that way, and they saw something in me that was salvageable. They didn't allow me to believe that I would be in there for the remainder of my life. And so in a gentle way, because they wasn't like scared straight type bullying me, but they surrounded me, and they made me read things that added value to me. They made me listen to things and watch things that added value to me in ways in which I couldn't even see what they saw in me. And so, and when you have that much disposable time, I mean, a lot of my earlier time was just solitary confinement. And so, and being blessed to have a mom who worked at the Library of Congress. And so I had access to anything that was ever copyrighted. My mom could Xerox it and mail it to me. And so just the way that aligned, it makes me think about Malcolm Gladwell, Outlaws of Success, in the 10,000 hours. And so I probably had 1,000,000 hours to read Eckhart Tolle, Stillness Speaks, The New Earth, Malcolm Gladwell, Blink, Outlaws of Success, Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, John C. Maxwell, 21 Irrefutable Laws, Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Thich Nhat Hanh, How to Love, How to Be Silent, all these different great minds who captured their ideas and their philosophy in between the covers of these books. And so that's kind of like where I took rest at for a large portion of my life, was in between those covers. And if that's what you put into yourself, information and perspective, looking at things from like the law of attraction and transcending adversity and kind of going into man's search for meaning, Viktor Frankl. When you put that type of information into yourself, that's what you start to put out. And so for me, that was the thing. Like, of course I was angry at first. I was very angry. I used to fight a lot. I almost stabbed somebody and killed him. I would fight with the guards. I would riot, anything that can just like, because it's kind of hard to accept being in there as a child, 16, and a whole system is against you, telling you that you're going to be there for the remainder of your life, but especially for something that I didn't do. And so, because I'm big on accountability, and so them coming to me and telling me that if I cooperate with them, they know that I didn't do it, and if I cooperate with them to prosecute the person who did it and other people who committed other crimes, that they would let me go. And me refusing that offer, because it's like, I don't believe in, when it comes time to reap what we sow in the lifestyle decisions that we make, that we throw other people under the bus in order to mitigate our consequences. And so even though I was innocent, I didn't feel that it would be in alignment with my morals and principles, with accountability, to just implicate someone else just for me to get out. And so, because I wouldn't like if somebody did that to me. And I think that's what empathy looks like. It's like when you could look at another person and feel what they feel and put yourself in their position. And so, but yeah, that's why I'm not angry is bitter or angry. And that really like breaks my heart in society, because I think like no person I've ever met articulated love and anger as poetically as James Baldwin in his essays and his speeches. And he said, yeah, the African American or the Black or the Negro at that time, well, he probably used that word, has all the right in the world to be angry. And they would be justified in it. But love is a greater emote to use as a fuel to redress the grievances that have been inhumanely thrown upon people just because they fit in this spectrum of being Black or poor or gay or trans, right? Or a woman. And so yeah, I understand like the spectrum of anger is always there and it's accessible. But when you have a purpose and a gift that that fuels your purpose, that gives you the equipment that you need to move through this spinning planet with balance in pursuit of your purpose, love is always the most efficient emotion to lead with. And so I'm just big on efficiency. So I'm not like a robot. Like, of course, I get angry every time I drive. Every time my wife and I have a misunderstanding or my daughter has a tantrum, but love is always the best emotion to lead with.
I'm just imagining the curriculum that you pursued while incarcerated, what that would mean if that was the curriculum in schools everywhere.
Yeah, one of the greatest things outside of like, James Allen, as a man thinketh, uh, the path to prosperity, the ways, the keys to the kingdom. I mean, his most famous book is As a Man Thinketh. But I've read like a few of his books and P.T. Barnum, Bailey, and just these different people who spoke about like energy, the law of attraction. Today they call it like the secret, the magic. Sometime in history they call it alchemy. I think a lot of people get alchemy confused with just transforming base metals into gold, but it's really about transforming base conditions and sentiments into golden opportunities. And so, but what was also very important, that would be important to share with children too, but also as we talked about before we began this interview, with the stock market losing almost $3 trillion in value today, is the economic and financial literacy component that I received in there. And the reason why I say that's important is because not for the finance part of it, which is important because every adult does have a financial responsibility, which I do think is very important. When you look at the statistics, they say that Social Security and things like Medicare will, high possibility they won't be there when our children are adults. They may not even be there for us at our retirement. But the main thing that it taught me was value. And value is so important because a lot of people who experience suffering in the urban coastal cities in which I was raised on the East Coast, but do a lot of business in now in San Francisco and LA and all these coastal areas, New York and Philly. So many people suffer from depression because they don't have the things that society and social media has attached extreme value to. And so it makes them, and even if they do have it, it's never enough, right? It's insatiable. And so value is so important because when you don't understand that you have not only the ability, but the responsibility to self-appraise people, places, and things for yourself, as a counterbalance to the market's appraisal, um, when you neglect to understand that you allow this world to impose its values on you. And if you may not have like a true desire for a Mercedes, right? Or a Birkin bag, or a house in, a vacation home in Big Sky, Montana, right? But if your circle of influence shows you as a child, it's expected of you to go to an Ivy League school, get this type of degree, this type of career, articulate how you feel with this particular type of vernacular, have this type of spouse, this type of career, this type of home, this type of vacation home, then when you don't value these things inside genuinely, and no one teaches you that you have the right to determine the people, places, and things that you value, then you'll pursue these things at the happiness of someone else. And you'll find yourself with all these things and feeling like a cargo, right? Because the joy is gone and it's so heavy. And it's because I've been spending my most valuable resource, which is time, which is invaluable. And this is what they sentence to you in prison. They take your time, right? It's no coincidence they attach time, months, days, months, weeks, years, to a offense, because it's your most valuable and it's really invaluable asset. And when you dispose of so much, when you don't understand that you have the ability and the responsibility to start to appraise everything for yourself, and how does it align with how it makes you feel, right? You would devote so much of your time and your health to pursuing people, places, and things that add little to no value to you. And when you turn around and you have the net worth evaluation and the accredited investor status, but you're like, man, I'm empty. I'm not happy, and I live my whole life to please someone else or to uphold someone else's value.
So that's what I'm curious about next is, and I want to talk about your art too, and your writing. So now you're becoming increasingly popular as an artist, right? People are buying your work. How does that change how you do your art in a way? And I'm assuming, given what you just said, it sounds like you are very self-aware about pursuing things that have value to you, period. And yet, if you're doing art that is being sold and it's capturing a new market that has, a higher threshold of price tags, how do you do art so as to not please and not pursue something that just has extrinsic value?
For me, it's like I didn't start painting until the quarantine. And so I was released in March 2019. I started a publishing company in prison. I had 11 books. So I got out. I was doing public speaking, sell my books at my public speaking events. People started to see like, oh, you have poetry books. Do you do spoken word? I'm like, I can. And so I started incorporating spoken word into my public speaking, and I ended up doing like some collaborations with some choirs, and I was supposed to do an opera about my life with spoken word, and then COVID happened, and so all of my in-person events were canceled. And I just received a grant from the Art for Justice Fund, and so I was like, and it was for me to do spoken word, and so I said, well, people cry when I recite the poetry, maybe I'll just paint it. And so I just started out just painting poetry, just words. And then it evolved into like my own unique iconography. which I never thought that I could do because I don't know how to draw. And so I think I don't know how to draw. I don't know color theory. I don't know my colors. I don't know if you mix purple with green. I don't know what color will make. And so I have so little ego attached to my visual art. It allows me to create it. It's like a spiritual trance that I go into, that's not like connected from my mind. It's not like, only way it's connected to my mind is like I'll learn new words. So I'll ask you like, what's that word that your husband said? I would want to get that. And then I'll like paint something around that word, right? But um with my visual art, I've been able to keep the creative process spiritual, right? But once it's done, that's when the entrepreneur hat comes on, right? And not to say that buying and selling can't be a spiritual experience as well, but now I have to navigate through the world commercially, and so and I enjoy both. I think that's what kind of like separates me from most artists is that most traditionally trained artists, the masters fine arts program, they do not teach them business. And so though they may know a lot about like technique, history when it comes to visual art, visual language, they're completely at the mercy of the art dealer and the gallerist. With me, I've studied business extensively. I started selling drugs when I was 12. It was illegal, but nonetheless, it gave me experience in self-enterprise. And so when I went to prison, when I was 16, it wasn't difficult for me to start a publishing company because I already had a self-enterprise in a dangerous uh, industry and in a dangerous community, Washington, D.C., having the highest murder rate per capita at that time in America. And so going to prison and starting a publishing company and getting out and transitioning to the fine art space, it wasn't difficult to me. And so when I'm creating the work, it's purely spiritual. I have no concern with the marketability of the work because people always just liked it, when I just was doing it from the spiritual trance. And so, and they continue to like it. And so I'm blessed that I don't have to worry about, will this color sell, or, maybe this might not fit in someone's home because most decor is, neutral colors, and maybe this might be too much primary for. And so I've just been blessed that I don't have that situation. So, but it is a reality, the spiritual and the commercial, and balance, balance in both
Mm.
at a global level.
Mm. Mm. That too. So, okay, picking up on that thread, you've got the next generation. You've got a daughter. I just heard you say congratulations.
Yeah.
You're married with a
Thank
daughter. That's
you.
your only child for the moment?
Yes. One and done.
Okay, same with me. I hear you.
Yeah, one and done.
What do you think you would like to teach her?
Kindness. That's it. Kindness. Kindness and character. So I was talking to my mom the other day, and I was like, I want to start taking her once because she just started Montessori school, and just in 1 month, I see the improvement in her articulation, helping to clean up things of that nature. So when the timing is right, I want to like just start taking her and just going to places to serve people in shelters, for her to see that it's children that don't have PlayStations and they don't have access to somebody to buy them Roblox every day, and they don't have food, they don't have a beach house to go to, and so because I really wanted her most of all, I want to teach her character, and what I want to provide for her is tutors who teach her different languages. I want her to be a polyglot because I grew up in a very homogenous city, which is very unique from the rest of America. Washington, D.C., when I grew up, probably was 90 to 95% Black, and so um, it rooted me in my culture, but it also, I didn't realize until I went to federal prison, I had the opportunity to be around Italians and Dominicans and Mexicans and Russians, um, the limited perspective that I had. And so in a globally connected world, I want her to have character that which she can lead with love and kindness and empathy, but also to be assertive. Um, just because she's a woman or because she's what they believe is Black, she doesn't have to be afraid or to settle for less or to be angry. Um, but to be assertive and leading with love and not passive. But also, I wanted to know multiple languages and experience different living in different places because um, I think it's important that her children have a global perspective and be globally connected. Because for me, the greatest wealth has always been social capital. And so I understand the importance of economic capital, but when you have cultural capital, meaning like embodied character and work ethic and morals and a certain level of intelligence and academia, but you can always use the cultural embodied capital to develop genuine relationships with people and institutions that'll lead to you getting the economics. And so for me, as a creative, as an individual in a creative economy, competing globally, um, or just existing globally, um, my greatest asset in my portfolio is my social capital. I value my relationships more than anything. And so starting with my relationship with myself, how I treat myself and then others. And so, and knowing that the others, we're all interconnected. And so when you value social capital and you have character, accountability, um, morals and principles, empathy, uh, good listening skills, and you can speak different languages, you won't have any problems with making money.
Mm.
And so that's why I want to give her the character, the kindness with the character, and then also the ability to understand, and art, to connect with people through their language, to be able to tell someone I empathize with you in Italian, right? And when we're in Italy, and not have to use the word empathy, right? It resonates with people in a more visceral way when you can use, their language to connect with them.
Very, very, very cool. I'm curious. I know we're coming on time, so I still have so many questions. But what's coming up for now is I'm trying to visualize you with your fellow inmates having. So you talked about this group of elder men,
Mm-hmm.
who were going to stay there for life, and they recognized something in your eyes and something about you. They knew you were going to get out, and then they surrounded you, showed you some love, encouraged you to read some books, and then you were on your path. Did you get the chance to be fully expressed in the system with everyone, or were you like part of a smaller group of guys that were like in a book club together? Like, I'm just curious
Mm-hmm.
to know how that actually plays out. Did people appreciate that about you, or think that, you were, woo woo?
I think, prison is just like a microcosm of the general society. And so you got your jocks, and
Mm,
all they want to do is like play sports and, who's pitching tonight, who they just into the sports world. That's their love language is sports. And so then you have like your artisans and entertainers. So you got your people who do their painting and their sculptures and rap music and sing and play the instruments in the band. Me, I was in the law library. And so reading books, litigating, our cases. Um, it's, when you're in the law library in prison, you stand in the, and I worked in the law library almost in every prison I was at. So you stand in a unique position because if you work in recreation, okay, you can get somebody in the gym when nobody else can get there. Maybe they can lift weights, they can listen to music, they can go paint or do whatever in the arts department. But when you work and you exist a lot of your time in the law library, you have the information that a person believes that can get them out of prison. And so you become kind of invaluable to them in a unique way because it's like you may find that case or file that motion or brief or write this letter to my lawyer or judge that can get me out of here. And so it's a different type of status and importance that's attached to that community in there. And so that was my community. And there, when you have the law library and the library are attached, and so, guys can go from, the Black's Law Dictionary and studying all these different Latin terminology that's used in the penal code, to a deep dive into the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution and how that impacts them in the future of what they want to do as entrepreneurs when they return to society. And so a very niche community. And so a lot of people thought that were not a part of that community, probably thought that I was being unrealistic. I would read like the Wall Street Journal, the Kiplinger report, the Burns finance report, and I had all the Burns finance dictionaries. And so, I would just read this stuff and I'll get the Wall Street Journal magazine and go, oh yeah, I'm gonna go there. And I'm gonna get out. I'm gonna get my pay. I'm gonna go to Tuscany. Yeah, I'm gonna go to Singapore. And yeah, where that Sausalito? Yeah, that looked like it. I'm gonna go there and there. Amalfi Coast. Yeah, and so and I can see why, because the statistics show that the criminal legal system, 7 out of 10 people come back within 3 years with a new case. And the society is set up, the algorithm of society, the operating system is set up to where as though the language around a person who experiences that, the inmate, the felon, the ex-con, it's a language that has either an overt or latent demeaning, connotation to it. And so a lot of things that I aspired to, no one had never seen before in their lived experience. And so it seemed unrealistic.
Sure.
But I don't think anybody doubt now. So we know that it can be done. And so now how do we use this purposeful empathy to show that you don't have to be an outlier to go through that experience and come home and do incredible things, or to be the 12-year-old who decided to sell drugs after passing their pre-SATs at the age of 11 and taking classes at Howard University at 11, but feeling the pressure of the violence of poverty in a capitalistic city and society, a pressure to earn and to make something to get out of that destructive environment, but not having access to people who were art dealers or stockbrokers or venture capitalists or accredited investors. And so you just start selling drugs, And so how can we catch that 12-year-old and provide them with a way to use their genius and their work ethic and sweat equity to create things, products, and services that add value to their community, their nation, and the world, and to get them the access to the capital that they need to finance their ideas. And then the 38-year-old who's walking out of prison with dreams of being more in the face of a brutal society that sees them as less than. So how do we provide them with the people resources to get them the resources that they need to be what they define to be successful and not return to prison. Because who wants to go back to prison? Like, come on, like
Right,
it's crazy.
right, right. So, you're asking the rhetorical question, but I wonder also, am I hearing like 5 years, 10 years out, is there a pay it forward, pave the way, big dream in you? Like, where do you see yourself moving towards? What do you hope to do?
Stephen Covey always said, you begin with the end in mind. And so I had a dream when I was in prison that I was an older man. I was standing on the tarmac with two other my business partners. They were males, and we own jets, we own factories, warehouses. And I remember I looked at them and I looked at both of them and I said, "Wow, we accomplished this in 25 years." And so I knew at that point I would get out one day, and that I would be out for 25 years and I would accumulate some things. And so in a dream, I went into one of the factories and opened a box, and it was a letter on yellow paper that I had handwritten in pencil to my my stepsister back in the 90s, right? And I opened and I looked at the letter and I reflected. This is all a dream. I'm an older man now, and so being released in 2019, the plan is 2044, which is the 25-year mark. In between that time, I realized the joy is in the unknowing. Like, it's no way you could convince me when I did, when I came home in 2019, that 5 years later that I would be a painter in museums and art galleries. I would say, like, I've never painted. I don't know how to draw. It's impossible, right? And so with that said, what happens in between now in 2044, it's just maintaining the love and intention, uh, moving through the world with a purpose to share my gifts in a way that I add value to people more intrinsically than they give me back in return in fiat currency, Federal Reserve promissory notes. So if I sell you a sneaker for $100, a hoodie for $40, a painting for $30,000, it is my intent that what the painting, the sneaker, and the hoodie adds to you when you're aware of the messaging and the intention and the creative process of this product, that it adds more value to you intrinsically, right? It makes you feel better every time you wear this hoodie and you see the messaging or the iconography on it. It makes you feel like Clark Kent putting on a cape. And so, and with that said, philanthropically, definitely a nonprofit, but that's basic thinking. Because at the end, of course, I want to have a family office, and so I want my family office to be set up in a way it's just not a institution to build intergenerational wealth, but it's an institution in a legacy to add wealth intergenerationally, to the human family, and to be assertive in that. And so what that looks like, the basic answer could be a nonprofit foundation, but I realized that as long as you carry the intention to add value to people in a loving way, you lead with love, life will surprise you. It'll take you to things that you thought were impossible. And it's things like 10 years ago, I didn't know about a family office. And so now I do. And so it's probably other things that I don't know about, that'll lead to me doing the work that I love to do. And that's leading with love. And so, and then being in a position to have a lot of wealth, in people and intangible asset classification, it just gives me an opportunity to do some things creatively, that I think that can catch that 12-year-old and that 38-year-old and to get more positive outcomes. Because I believe we could do better. It's a lot of things in the private sector, and the public, but mostly the private. I think we put too much hope every 4 years into this individual, you know, to rectify things that we can do every day within ourselves internally, and then our homes, and then with our neighbors, our communities, to make our experience more safer, more more enjoyable, you know, in America. And so that's what I'm committed to. I'm not waiting on a ballot
Well, I'm not
to
going to speak on
get
behalf
things
of,
done.
I'm not going to speak, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I'm just too excited to say this. Well, I have one last question, but before I get there, I want to just let you know I have a dinner party tonight. It's I'm taping this, it's almost 4 p.m. When we hang up, I'm gonna set the dinner table and go out and buy some wine. And I'm bringing some people that don't even know each other together, just really good people. And I am in such a good mood getting off this call with you. So I just want to thank you so much. It's very inspiring to spend some time with you. It's very, very inspiring.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. My last question I asked all of my guests is if you can think of a time in your life when you were on the receiving end of empathy and what that meant for you.
I think one of the greatest moments in my life is when the judge released me. I remember before, as we were going through we got the law change that allowed the juvenile lifers to come back and the petition to be released. I was the poster child of the law. And so to punish me, the officials in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, they sent me from a medium security prison in West Virginia, which was close to my family. And a week after the law passed, they transferred me to a maximum security institution in California, knowing that historically guys from DC have a racial conflict with Mexicans in the Aryan Brotherhood. And so I remember
that's terrible.
Yeah, and I remember they sent me out there, and I'm like, damn, they kind of like put me in a position to, either way, it's like you can get harmed or you could defend yourself. But at that time, I hadn't had an infraction in 15 years. And so keep in mind, I'm about to go to court. I've been in jail for, at that time, 20 years. I went 15 years with no infraction. And so if you send me out here and I just get into a fight, it's like, oh, okay, he's not rehabilitated, right? And then, so I remember being there, and they appointed me these corporate lawyers, and the corporate lawyers are just, they wanted other people to go before me before I went back to court. I'm like, I don't really have the time. I'm out here in California. It could be a race ride that could happen any day. I got to get out of here. Like, get me back to DC, at least in that correctional institution there. And so they were dragging, and so I filed a motion. I remember I was in the institution was on lockdown, and I wrote a motion to the judge by hand, and I was just explaining to her my situation. I was like, I'm holding on, but this is a dangerous situation out here, you know, and so I need to come back. I need to fire my attorneys. I'll represent myself, or I'll get representation, but I need you to get me back to DC so I can prepare. I can't even communicate with my lawyers. We're always on institution lockdown, and I'm all the way in California. They can't come visit me, and so and she responded to the motion. She ordered for me to have a hearing by phone. Right, we was on institution lockdown. I got that in the mail. I was so happy, and I remember, because all the guys in the unit with me knew that I was fighting to get out. And I remember they got me out of the cell, and I went to the case manager office, and I had my hearing on the phone. And she was like, you know, she ordered a prosecutor to issue a writ for me to come back to DC. She was just saying, like, I understand your situation. My parents was in the courtroom, but I was just on the phone, but everybody could hear me. She was like, I understand your situation. You've been in prison, you know, for 20 years. You haven't had an infraction in 15 years. It's unfair that they sent you to a maximum security prison in California, knowing that the law had just changed. And she's like, I want the government to put in a writ to get them back immediately. And this was on a Thursday. And she was like, I want them back by Monday. And so that was my moment of empathy.
Thank you for sharing that story. It's a very big story.
Yeah, it's emotional.
The reason why I love asking this question is the stories are always different. I never know what to expect. But it's always a reminder to me. And I think it's probably the reason why I like doing these podcasts so much. I learn so much, but I'm always brought back to the feeling at the end of the call. It's a superpower. Empathy, we can exercise our capacity to be kind to one another, and we can move the world, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for watching and listening. And we'll see you next week at Purposeful Empathy. Thank you so much for watching or listening to another episode of Purposeful Empathy, a show that is dedicated to amplifying the voices of people from across the globe who understand that the world needs more empathy and are doing something about it. Please now consider subscribing or buying a copy of Purposeful Empathy. Thanks again. Have a great day.